welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Sneha and I make videos related to books, and welcome to tier ranking my quarter 1 reads. So yeah, before we start, apologies for the background noise. There's a lot of construction going on around me and this is like my constant background noise, and I've already delayed filming this video a lot, so I just want to finish it. So yeah, apologies for that. I will try to speak loudly to counteract that. But yeah, today I'm going to be tier ranking all my January, February and March 2023 reads. I'll include the tiers right here for you to take a look, and I'm going to quickly go through them, and we are not going to do detailed synopses on any of them. But if you're interested on long form book reviews or long form captions regarding book reviews, you should check out my Instagram channel. I'll include the handle down below, where I post pretty much regularly on what I'm reading, my thoughts as I'm reading, and my end wrap up thoughts. So yeah, with that being said, let's talk about the tiers that we have. The first tier is sheer blissful perfection. This is for 5-star reads. Nothing is wrong. There is nothing that I found wrong in this book, and these are like my absolute favorites. So that's tier number 1. Tier number 2 is a complete airplane book. By this I mean that usually like a 3.5, 4-star read. Basically books that I can read comfortably for extended stretches of time. Best completed in an airplane where you have nothing else to do. So that's my second tier. My third tier is just about okay. So I would say like 3-star books. There is nothing amazing about it, but there's nothing terrible about it. So it's a very average book, so to say. The next one is not my wipe. The next one is not my wipe. Typically 2-star reads. Basically, it didn't work for me. Maybe it can work for somebody else. So those kind of books. And the last tier, the 1-star read, is just no. Like, I would not recommend this book. And yeah, but again, these are just my personal opinions. If these are against your opinions, just remember they're opinions and they're very subjective to people. And yeah, that's my disclaimer. So anyway, let's get started. Let's talk about my January reads first of all. So I have a detailed wrap-up video for my January reads, which I'll link up above. Do check it out. So I'm not going to go into detail with any of these books. We're just going to quickly rank them. The first book that I finished was My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. This is a book about a woman who decides to medicate herself into sleeping for a year in order to get over her grief and other like general existential crises. It just felt like a very long narration of psychiatric medicines and the after effects of them, and I really did not enjoy it. So I'm going to rank this not my vibe. It's definitely a vibe of many people on the internet here. Then I have Happening by Annie Ernaux. This is a non-fiction memoir that I listened to on audiobook. It is translated from French, and it's about the author's narration of how she fell pregnant in the 60s when in France when abortion was illegal, and she was in her 20s. So it's about her trying to get rid of this pregnancy and eventually succeeding. It's extremely brutal, it's extremely haunting. Since the author is reading out diary entries, it really impacts you, and it's extremely powerful. I love this book. I'm going to rate this sheer blissful perfection. It's a very short read. You definitely should check it out, and the audiobook, special kudos to that. Then I have Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I read this in the middle of a reading slump and I wanted to change. So this is like a sci-fi book. There's a sun-eating organism and it is threatening to wipe out the earth. And then there is this mission which is sent into space, and this one man is trying to save planet Earth. And there are a lot of like space shenanigans. That's all I'm going to say. I did enjoy this. It did put me out of the reading slump, and for that it does deserve credit. A lot of the science went over my head, but that's a me problem. So I did enjoy this. So I'm going to put this in a complete airplane book. I did enjoy this, and it did give me a lot of fun. Then I have The Man Who Died Twice by Richard Osman. This is book 2 in the Thursday Murder Club series. It is set in this English retirement village, and it has a bunch of like grandmother, grandfather characters, and they're trying to solve a murder mystery. It has ex-CIA agents, it has robberies, it has theft, it has diamonds, and all of these like really interesting things. But at the end of the day, it's a very cozy mystery, and it is a cozy mystery that I cuddled up over a weekend and I finished it. So definitely a 4-star read, and also a complete airplane book. You can just finish this in one plane and you'll have a blast. I love the characters in this mystery. Then is Thank You for Listening by Julia Whelan. This is an audiobook, and it's an audiobook about audiobook narrators, romance audiobook narrators. So this character is So the main character is a failed actress, not exactly a failed actress. She went through a tragic accident, and because of that, her actress dreams are kind of waylaid. So she gets into audiobooks. Then she's asked to do this audiobook narration with another famed audiobook narrator, and they fall in love, and the rest is bookish history. I did enjoy this. It's not too syrupy sweet. It has substance, but also it gets very draggy towards the end, and the character in particular gets too stubborn for me towards the end. So because of that, I'm gonna put this in the second tier. It is not. I wanted it to be sheer blissful perfection, but it was not. Then I have Nancy Mitford, The Pursuit of Love. This is a classic Victorian novel about this aristocratic family called the Radletts, and they are very not aristocratic, like they're all of them are very, very interesting, out of the ordinary characters. In particular, I fell in love with Linda, who's the main kind of like focus of this book, and she's a complete romantic. She's only looking for her one true love, and because of that she falls into multiple marriages, and then you have the shadow of war looming over this entire book. But I loved this book. It charmed the pants of me. Linda charmed the pants of me, to be very honest, and I was just delighted to read this book. There is a tragic twist towards the end, but I loved my time with it. It's one of those classics that you can definitely read without getting bored. So for me, it was sheer blissful perfection. So yeah. Then we move on to my February books. I went through the biggest reading slump ever in February. My mental health was really not doing well. There were a lot of things happening in life, and because of that I finished only 2 books. The first book is An Artist of the Floating World by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is set in Japan after World War II. So Japan, when it is under the US occupation, it's reeling with economic devastation because of the war. And our protagonist Masuji Ono, it was a celebrated painter before the war, and he becomes radical during the war, and he uses his art as propaganda to push Japan into war. And in the present day, a lot of the generation blame him and his like for pushing Japan into the war and into these consequences. So he's kind of had to deal with his life and his decisions up to that point. Ishiguro I love as an author. I feel like all his books, there's an undercurrent of something sinister coming up, and that is intact in this book, and because of that I was reading this very keenly, and it gives you a sense of how Japan was post the war, and it's very atmospheric that way. So for me, this is a 4-star read. I wouldn't say you can complete it in one sitting, but it was a 4-star read, so that's why it goes in the second tier. Then I have Less is Lost by Andrew Sean Greer. This is book 2 of the Less series. So we follow Arthur Less, who's the main character. He's now facing a financial crisis, so he decides to take up like a bunch of assignments across the US and goes on a road trip. And in that he meets like a bunch of interesting characters. He meets his father. He has a personal reckoning of sorts. But this book is narrated from the point of view of Freddie Pilu, his longtime lover, and it has a lot of questions about what it means to be loved, what it means to have lost, what it means to be in the process of falling in love. And there are a lot of delightful adventures which happen in this book, which are great. But for me, I loved this book for the conversations it brought in terms of love and in terms of wanting someone and companionship and all of these wonderful things. One quote in particular stood out to me. I will put the screenshot of it right here, and yeah, it's just my favorite quote from this book. So yeah, pause to read the quote. And for me, I really enjoyed this book. So I would say this was a 4.5-star read. It's not fully a 5-star read, so I'm going to place it in the second tier. Coming down to March. Now March completely changed the game for me. There was one book in particular that I read that really pulled me out of the reading slump, and I went on to read 7 books in this month, which is quite a feat for me. Things also improved for me in terms of my own life, like personal and professional, and because of that I read a lot more. And I went on vacation towards the end, 4 days in Goa, lying on the beach, reading books, just the best time. So I finished actually 3 books on vacation. So yeah, because of that really helped bump up the numbers. But talking about the book that actually helped me lift me out of the reading slump, it is Unaccustomed Earth by Jhumpa Lahiri. Returning to a favorite author is almost like you are cold and wet and you're reaching for your comfort blanket and then you go to sleep. So it sort of felt like that for me. Jhumpa Lahiri writes so easily, like there's no fancy words or lyricism or anything of that sort in her words, but it's so comforting in a way. It's very hard to describe how her writing is for me, but this is a set of short stories, and it is about Bengali Indians in the US, so Bengali Indian immigrants in the US, and their travails and all of that. So it's typical Jhumpa Lahiri stuff. If you've ever read her short stories, this is in that very similar pattern. So I wouldn't say this is my favorite collection of her short stories, but it did the job. It helped me lift out of this reading slump, and I went on to read a lot more books. So for that, 1 extra star. So I'm gonna place this in the second tier. It is actually a complete airplane book, and you can finish it in one sitting. So okay, then I have my second ever graphic novel that I've ever read. I have an entire reading vlog about this, so I'm not gonna really go into this, but this is a non-fiction memoir about Holocaust. It's a Holocaust book. It's set in the concentration camp, and the art of this book is beautiful. The story is a typical concentration camp story, so it like everything, it tugs at your heartstrings. But I did not enjoy this book as much because of the person narrating it. He was a misogynist, racist old man who is going through PTSD. It's very clear, but he does not get any help for it. So because of that, it's not a very enjoyable reading experience. So I would actually say this was just about okay. I think there are other concentration camp books that actually add to the experience a lot more and add to the narrative a lot more. So yeah. Then I have The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. How do you describe this book? So this is a metaphorical, satirical, Russian classic book about how the devil arrives in Moscow with like a bunch of characters, including a fat, talking black cat, and he proceeds to wreak havoc, and he proceeds to start killing or attacking the members of the free press. So this is supposed to be like a take on how censorship works under the Soviet Union, and yeah, so like I mentioned, it's a very metaphorical, satirical take. It is an experience reading this book. There is also like this sidetrack of a love story between lovers who are willing to go into hell just to be with each other, and there's also like Jesus Christ and Pontius Pilate and all of this. So there's a lot happening in this book, a lot of madcap adventures, but I think this is one of those books that you need a second reading to really get the subtext and the context, especially after knowing how the end is, and especially after knowing the setting of this book. So I did enjoy it, but I think I would love it a lot more on a second reading, which I do plan to. So for now, I'm going to put this in the second tier, but this was an adventure and a half, that's all. So yeah, then I have The Lost Daughter by Elena Ferrante. This is an Italian translated book, and it's about this woman, a divorced woman, who for the very first time in her life, she's alone from her kids, and she decides to go on a solo vacation. Over there she meets this other young woman and her toddler, and she gets kind of like entangled in their lives, and there's this one incident that happens that really shakes her up and brings back memories of her own past as a young mother and struggling to adjust to having children. And Ferrante for me has a penchant for writing these really unlikable characters that you do not enjoy reading them, but you relate to them because they are very human at the end of the day. Ferrante for me has a penchant for writing these really unlikable characters that you do not enjoy reading them, but you relate to them because they are very human at the end of the day. So this is a book about motherhood, about womanhood, about how to not lose yourself in the process of raising children, and how important it is to have a sense of your own self. Again, it has sinister like undercurrents, and because of that you keep reading. It's also a very thin volume, so you can definitely complete it on an airplane or in one sitting. So I'm gonna put this in the second tier. I did enjoy my time with it, and the character is beautifully sketched. So yeah. Then I have Victory City by SALMAN Rushdie. This is a historical fiction, magical realism take on Pampa Kampanna, who is this young woman who gets magical powers, and she uses them to literally breathe life into a kingdom which sees the rise and fall of 3 dynasties, including the Sangam dynasty and the era of Krishnadevaraya, who's a very famous king in the history of India. So it's a very feminist retake, and it's a very feminist retelling, because Pampa Kampanna imagines this kingdom to be a woman's heaven, kind of like women have equal rights, they are in line for succession and all of these things. So I like the take, I like the feminist narrative, and SALMAN Rushdie is a magician, of course, with his words. He's so good with painting scenes in front of your eyes and the detail and the magic of it. But I felt the magic was missing a little bit. I did not enjoy this book as much as I enjoyed the other one of his books that I read, which was Shalimar the Clown. There was something missing. It didn't come together as beautifully as that book did. So for that reason, I'm gonna put this in just about okay. I did enjoy my time with it, but I don't think this was a 4-star read. So yeah. Then I have The Sentence by Louis Eldridge. So this is about a book about a Native American woman who is wrongfully incarcerated, is finally released after a few years in jail. She is employed in a bookstore and she discovers books and a love for literature. And the setting is in this bookstore where it is haunted, where it becomes haunted by this like ghost. And we see how they deal with the pandemic in 2020 and also the killings of George Floyd and the riots which happened in Minnesota, I want to say, after that. So yeah, this is a book of reckoning. It is a book about civil rights. It's also a book about how literature can save your life, about how books are amazing and how bookstores are this magic haven of magical things. So yeah, I love a book about books. I love books set in bookstores. I learned a lot about Native Americans and their history and how oppressed they were in the making of the country, as so to see, and how America was in the beginning of the pandemic and how the BLM movement actually like took shape in the very initial beginnings in 2020. The BLM movement has been there for a while now. So yeah, I love this book. I read this on vacation and I could not put it down. It was witty, it was sparkling, but it also had a lot of food for thought, and because of that, I'm gonna put this in sheer blissful perfection. I really enjoyed this book and I'm looking forward to reading this author more. Then we have Finding Me by Viola Davis, the one and only. This is a memoir, but I listened to it on audiobook, which is narrated by Miss Viola Davis herself. So this is a memoir of growing up in poverty, growing up in kind of like an abusive childhood, violent childhood, I would say, rising out of her poverty by going to school for theatre at Juilliard, and then finding her way in the acting world and being the celebrity that she is today, and how we know her for. Man, what a voice this woman has. Like when she was narrating her own words, it gave me chills at so many points of time. She is beautiful. She is such a great narrator. She's such a great writer as well. So because of that, it just added to the experience. I will pay for her to narrate other similar books and I will happily listen. I loved my time with it. I feel like she has had such an incredible journey. It was difficult, it was hard, but it was also beautiful. And she's also so graceful. She's so forgiving. And yeah, there's so much to learn from this woman, and I absolutely loved her memoir. I think I would recommend this to everybody to go check it out, and because of that, I'm gonna put this right at the top, sheer blissful perfection for me. I mean, there's a reason that she is an EGOT, and there's a reason that this book has won everything that there is, and it absolutely deserves to, and she deserves to be at that status. So yeah, those are all the books that I read in Q1 of 2023. Thank you so much if you're still around, if you're still watching. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Please follow me on Instagram. You get quite regular updates over there, I would say, and I will see you next time. Bye.